Hello, welcome to the Analyst Inside Cricket with me, Simon Hughes.
And I'm Simon Mann.
It's the 23rd of September, and we've jumped on for two reasons, actually. One, of course, to pay tribute to the great life of Dickie Bird, who passed away today, aged 92. And also, England have announced their Ashes squad and the squads for the matches in New Zealand as well that precede the Test matches in Australia. So there are two good reasons, really, to have a chat. And we must start with Dickie, Simon, because, what a fantastic innings. 92. And he was still setting off for his daily walk round the park, even last year. He had so much energy, so much vitality, didn't he? And he was a man who transcended cricket as well.
Well, it's remarkable that we're remembering an umpire, really, an official. You don't normally remember officials that much, in any sport, really, great referees or great umpires particularly. But you're right about Dickie Bird. You must have played in games with Dickie many times, Yoss, didn't you?
I did, many, many times. In fact, my first memory of him, actually, was the first Test match I ever attended, which was 1973, West Indies against England at Lord's. And I was, 11 or something, taken along. There was a bomb scare in that Test match, and Dickie had to take all the players off. And forever, it seemed from then on, some kind of misfortune seemed to follow him around, whether it was dark clouds. There was that time when the sun was flashing on a greenhouse at Old Trafford. They had to take the players off, even though it was glorious sunshine. They had to take the players off because the batters couldn't see. There was an explosion with the plumbing at Headingley, wasn't there, where water came up from underneath and flooded over Curtly Ambrose's ample foot, and he had to go off for that reason. Lots of sort of strange things occurred around him. That particular Test match I mentioned, 73, also famous for West Indies getting about 700, 3 centurions for the West Indies, including Garfield Sobers, who went off when he was about 90-odd not out with fatigue, took off to the dressing room, had a couple of brandies and came back. God knows what the umpires were saying about that, and obviously as an 11-year-old I wasn't aware of it. But you were aware of him as a presence on the field, both as a spectator and certainly as a player. Just all his antics, you remember he used to sort of shake his arms all the time and sort of shake his sleeves down, and he was always fussing about something, turning up very early in the morning before play to check everything. I think there's a famous story of him when in one of his first Test matches, turning up at the Oval at sort of 6 a.m. and being seen climbing the wall to sort of see beyond the boundary for some reason. What is it if the ball goes over the boundary, over the wall kind of thing? So, an extraordinary man. Do you remember him?
Well, I remember him watching him as an umpire, really. I don't think I ever met him. I was just trying to think today whether I ever met him or not. But yeah, I'd probably been in his presence, but never actually introduced him. Unlike you, you'd have been playing with him, and presumably him giving you no LBWs. I'll come back to that in a moment. But things I remember about him: umpire in the 1983 World Cup final, which India won. He gave Michael Holding out the last wicket to fall. I thought it was a bit high, actually, for a not-outer. I thought it was a bit high, to be honest. I've had a look back at the highlights today, and Michael Holding, I think, thought it was a bit high as well. Actually, I look back actually the wicket before, that was Barry Mayer, gave Andy Roberts out. Go and have a look at everybody. It was hit him outside the line. It was never out. We need a rerun of the 1983 World Cup final. Cricket history would have been so much different if those two umpires had not raised their fingers. Possibly, anyway, India might still have won the game.
And the 1992 World Cup final when Derek Pringle had Javed Mian plum LBW, didn't he, as well? But
yeah,
anyway,
but that wasn't Dickie.
No,
and
that wasn't Dickie.
I was there as well for his last Test match at Lord's, when he got the handkerchief out and dabbed his eyes. They gave him that guard of honour when he walked out to umpire, and then immediately gave others out LBW. It was plum, actually. When I was watching it on, I thought, yeah, you've got to give that. And it was so out. I think that was the thing about him, wasn't it? Although he was a not-outer, you kind of trusted his decisions. I never felt there was any, watching him umpire at Test level, there was never any bias at all with him.
Yeah.
Okay, it was a lot of not outs, but I never had that feeling that he kind of favoured one side or favoured a player or anything like that.
That's a really good point. And funnily enough, I said he transcended cricket. He transcended Britain as well, because He never umpired outside England very much. Obviously, in those days, the local umpires umpired their home test matches. Obviously, in Australia, it was Australian umpires, and Pakistan, it was Pakistani umpires. And Dickie umpired so many test matches in England, but never abroad, apart from on one occasion later on in his career. And yet he was famous around the world because, funnily enough, today I did a BBC News piece, and the presenter was a woman from New Zealand. And she said, yeah, he was famous in New Zealand. I didn't really even follow cricket, and yet we knew him, very well. And I mean, I'll tell a story about that match when his last test, when he umpired at Lords and gave Athers out, LBW, in a bit. But I think, one thing I would say about him was he was quite conservative, which is why he didn't give LBWs. He felt that was sort of rocking the boat. It was a bit disruptive to give an LBW, and it was because it was a wicket. So he always sort of tended to see in favour of the batsman in general. He was knocking all three down out, but absolutely. But those marginal ones he tended not to give. But he did look after bowlers in other ways. For instance, I had a no ball problem through probably my first 5 years, and he was an umpire who would say to you, "Well, come back a bit, come back. You're getting a bit close there." Whereas other umpires would just give a no ball without any warning because they're a bit officious. But Dickie was much more sympathetic to a bowler's lot and would say, "Oh, the footholds aren't great today, are they, lad? Keep going, lad, keep going." He was very encouraging like that. So that was a wonderful aspect to his personality. Then, of course, there was the madness and eccentricity as well. I mean, obviously, many people will have heard the story of Alan Lamb accidentally on purpose going out with his mobile phone in his pocket, handing it, having taken guard, to Dickie, saying, "Oh God, I've got this phone out here. Sorry, can you hold it for a bit?" And Dickie holding the phone, slightly kind of looking a bit kind of askance at Lammy, but then Ian Botham in the dressing room phoning the phone. And it goes off in Dickie's pocket during the middle of an over, sort of thing. So, there were those kind of silly incidents which players sort of played up to his sort of sense of humour. But I mean, my favourite story really about Dickie was one that just, bordered on total insanity, really, because it was a one-day semi-final. I think it was a Benson Hedges semi-final at Hampshire, the old Hampshire ground, Middlesex, Hampshire. Those were big games in those days. They're on telly, and you were kind of in the spotlight, and
crowds as well.
yeah, there were big crowds. I mean, this particular game was rain affected. Typical Dickie, sort of clouds around and things. He seemed to have a big black cloud on a string almost, and no play before lunch. And there were these terrible old dressing rooms at Northlands Road, Hampshire, where there were tiny, pokey little dressing rooms, and there was nowhere for the umpires to go. I mean, often umpires' rooms are tiny anyway, and this was, minute. And so he was sort of fussing around in our dressing room, looking for something to do. He was a bit of a fidget, and people were going, "Oh God, can't you do something with him? He's annoying." So I said, "Look, Dickie, let's go over the other side of the ground to the health club. We'll do a bit of a workout. Go to the gym and all that." And he was like, "Okay," So we went to the gym, and then we went in the sauna, and then finally there's a little jacuzzi there. So I said, "Well, look, come on, we're going to have a quick jacuzzi. It's still raining." He said, "Oh, all right then. Well, what is it? What is it?" And so he sort of got his kit off, and he just had his sort of long johns on, and he sank into this hot water and quite liked it. And I could tell he enjoyed it because he was basically almost dozed off, asleep in this hot jacuzzi. Anyway, eventually we came out, got dried off, went to have lunch, early lunch. The weather cleared up, and so we played. And I was opening the bowling for Middlesex that day, and Robin Smith had been earmarked to open the batting for Hampshire, who was a very daunting, intimidating opponent. And I knew I had to set the tone with a good first over. God knows why Mike Gatting identified me to do that. But anyway, I opened the bowling. And Gatting wasn't fielding at slip because he had a damaged hand. So he was at mid-off thinking, well, he'll be safe. My first ball of the match, as the crowd sort of filtered in, was a bit full, and Robin Smith drilled it straight at Mike Gatting at mid-off, who had to dive and stop it on his bad hand. And so he was already quite annoyed. The second ball, I dragged my length back a bit. Smith tried to hammer it square of the wicket on the offside because he was a severe cutter, and Mark Rambrick had diving stop. So that's 2 dot balls, at least 2 dot balls to start with. But I'm getting more and more anxious, thinking, God, how am I going to stop this from being a bad over? I ran in for my third ball, Dickie at my end. he sticks out his left arm, and I have to stop, pull up next to his left arm, thinking, well, he must have dropped his coins or something. And he just stared at me in the middle of this over, and he said, "Hey, it were grand in that bubble bath, wasn't it?" And I stared at him, and I mean, that was it. And then he said, "Play on," and we carried on. I mean, why he said that? I mean, at that point, it didn't help my concentration at all. I think the over went for about 8. I mean, Robin Smith was pissing himself laughing as well, so it probably helped in a way to sort of lighten the atmosphere. But I mean, that's the kind of mad guy he was. And there's just one other silly story associated with him, which kind of also sort of summed up his kind of otherworldliness, really. I mean, this is a really bad story about the lack of professionalism in the game, because I went out to bat to save a game against Notts at Trent Bridge, batting at number 9. I got out to the middle. We were just playing out for a draw. I got out to the middle to find a bat under my arm. And as I put my gloves on and got my bat from under my arm, I noticed there was a condom on the end of it, on the handle, a condom, which someone in the dressing room had obviously carefully applied. So I'm thinking, well, I can't bat with this. So I'm standing at the middle thinking, what shall I do with it? So anyway, I peeled it off. Dickie was at square leg, of course. So I had to hand it to Dickie, this condom. And he looked at it, sort of stretched it and sort of examined it like a sort of scientist would, and then went, "Oh, okay, I'll put it in my pocket then." Put it in his pocket. Nothing more was heard about it, but the problem was the lubricant had come off the condom onto my bat handle, and I played a couple of balls, a bat slips out of my hand. John Embry's at the other end. "What's going on? What the hell's going on?" I said, "Well, someone's put a condom on my bat, and now there's lubricant all over the bat handle. I can't hold it." So he said, "Well, all right, use mine." So we swapped bats. I immediately, now the condom lubricant's on my gloves, so the bat slipped out of my hand again, even though it was a new bat, bowled, hit wicket, sort of, inside edge onto stumps. So I then swapped my bats back and gave my bat to John Embry, and he was out straight after because his bat was now covered in the lubricant as well. So he got bowled out as well. Stupid story. And Dickie still had the condom in his pocket, and I don't know whatever happened to it.
What I normally say at this point is top level professional sport, everybody.
It does make your eyes boggle, doesn't it?
Yes, one thing about that. As you walked out to bat, like this is in my head, did you not notice? I mean, this is an important part of your equipment. Did you not notice there was a condom on your bat handle?
No, I did not. They are see-through, perhaps you haven't realised. It was well applied. I don't know. I mean, I was one of those people who put my bat under my arm and didn't actually hold it until I got to the middle. And at least I told the story the other day of on a column actually about Ian Botham in 1986-7, the Tour of Australia, the one tour when England won in the end, and he went out to bat against some Western Australian country 11 up country, and he got out to the middle and he didn't have a bat at all. I mean, that may have been because they were up to no good the night before, but still, at least I actually had a bat out in the middle.
Well, that sort of thing's happened before. Now, when you were bowling with Dickie, did he ever give you any LBWs? Can you remember it?
No.
He must have given you.
And I would reckon if he hadn't been umpiring, I'd have got another 50 first-class wickets. I jest. Maybe 10. No, he never did. I mean, that's my fault, I should have got enough batters trapped on the back foot, hit, on the shin, but I wasn't good enough,
Yeah, but
had
the point
a few
is,
marginal ones.
The point is that the umpires in those days, they did not give players out if they pushed forward, did they?
Well, some of them did, actually. I mean, there was one, Ray Julian was famous
for
firing people out even when they were probably about a foot outside off. But, he was a bowler's favourite. Yeah, but I suppose you're right in the main. Certainly kicking away spin. I mean, if you talk to John Embry about this, God knows how many more wickets he would have got, because people just played forward, bat behind pad, hit on the pad, right in front of the stumps. No, he's too far down the wicket, not out.
So how do you think Dickie would have coped with DRS then?
Yeah, interesting question. I mean, I actually, when the whole kind of technology thing was starting to happen, he had retired by then. really, once the sort of Hawkeye had come in and all that. He was quite interested, actually. And one day I remember somebody gave me this set of sort of like wraparound glasses with a TV monitor built into it so that you could actually wear these glasses and look at the TV replay. This is about 2004 or so. And actually, I showed them to him because he always used to be at Headingley, didn't he? Even after he'd given up umpiring, he was always at Headingley. He was passionately involved in the game, so interested and, turned up and was always on hand. And I just showed him these. He just used to love inspecting the pitch before play, even though he wasn't involved anymore. And I remember giving them these glasses one day, and he was like, "Well, they're quite interesting. Yeah, I can see." I said, well, one day we'll just be there to count from 1 to 6 and just be a hat stand." I said, "Well, sometimes you get that wrong." But I mean, no, he saw the funny side of it. I think in a way, perhaps he was quite pleased to have retired before DRS because it would have exposed him a bit, really. I mean, he would have improved, like anything.
Well, you'd have had to change the way he umpired, wouldn't it?
Yeah, he would have. And I mean, there were umpires definitely who started out as not outers, but gradually as DRS evolved, realised that more and more should be given out. And so, I'm sure Steve Buckner was one, for instance. Umpires did evolve. Listen, just going back to his that last match, his last test, 96 against England-India. And what I did, I really loved him. And, his book was so successful and I sort of admired all the stories in it and everything. So I thought, well, I'm going to try and capture his last test match. So I actually hired a proper TV camera and stood outside the umpire's room at Lord's in the pavilion, totally illegally. Nobody was allowed to do this, but I thought, sod it. There's only going to be one chance to film his last test match. So I followed him out of the umpire's room, up the stairs in the pavilion, down the stairs, tears in his eyes, through the long room, rousing reception, everyone packed in there, cheering him, cheering on. He went out and did his sort of guard of honour. Athers introduced him to everyone, didn't he? Introduced him to both teams, like it was the Queen or the King there. And he's out, off he goes out to the middle to umpire and gave Athers out about a third ball, having been sort of treated so chivalrously by Athers on the way out. Anyway, I filmed all of it from the pavilion, so I captured it all on camera. I thought, I've got a nice little scoop here I can sort of put out somewhere. I didn't really think where particularly. I just thought it was a big thing to have for posterity. And someone spotted me in the pavilion, of course, with a massive, great big camera, you would, and reported me to Lieutenant Colonel Stevenson, who was at the time the MCC secretary, chief exec. And I was summoned to his office. "Hand over the tape, Hughes. You're not allowed to do that. Hand over the tape." So I handed over the tape. But it wasn't the tape. It was a blank tape. So I kept the tape, but I never did anything with it.
So have you got that tape now?
I might have it. I don't know. In the depths of the Hughes archives, it might be somewhere.
Oh, well, you should have tried to dig that out today, Yoz. A lot of people would love to have seen that.
I think it's on some old format that probably has got corrupted over time. I don't know.
Ah.
Yeah, it might. I'll dig around and see if I can find it.
But on such a poignant day, I think, it would have been a really sort of fitting tribute, actually, wouldn't it? Just to see him walk out there. I mean, there are the pictures of him being out on the ground, legally shot by the BBC who were filming the match at the time, actually showing the match, as opposed to someone doing that illegally. Surprising that the first person to film inside the Lord's Pavilion was you illegally. What a surprise that was the case. Just before we move on, Yoz, to talk about the England Ashes squad. So we talked about his decision making. That he was a not outer, but it wasn't totally about that. And you kind of alluded to it already. It was kind of the way he conducted himself and the way he dealt with players on the field. That he was kind of like as well known for that as for being a scrupulous umpire.
No, I think that absolutely. He was just so encouraging, and he was always so pleased to see you. And he just loved the game. You just feel his love sort of poured out of every pore of his body. He just kind of exuded this enthusiasm and fun-loving. Obviously, Barnsley lad, had a funny turn of phrase, sort of summoning when there was that flood at Headingley and people were running out with mops and the covers and everything came out, and he said, "I don't need a mop, I need a plumber." I mean, he just had a kind of funny way about him, and players just loved him, especially batsmen, but bowlers as well. They treated him with so much respect, and uh, yeah, I mean, he was just an icon, really, wasn't he? And transcended the game, famous all around the world. His autobiography sold about 1 million copies. I think it's the most sold cricket book, isn't it? Something like that. His autobiography, full of packed with mad stories.
Yeah, that's remarkable. And he lived a remarkable life for the job he did.
Yeah. He obviously wasn't much of a player, struggled actually, and that may be another reason why, he gave the batsman the benefit of the doubt, because he had trouble himself making runs. He played a bit for Yorkshire and a bit for Leicestershire, but he didn't make a great success of playing, but he made a great success of umpiring. And he made umpiring significant, didn't he? I mean, they were, in a way, he was the first celebrity umpire, and there have been one or two since, but there's nothing wrong with that. Is a character that made you always want to watch. I mean, David Shepherd, after him, was also equally famous for his antics, and again, quite rightly so. It's just lovely to see. And Dickie had 28 years of umpiring, which is, a long time, because most umpires, well, in the past, were quite old when they took over, but he was relatively young. He started in his late 30s. So, he had such a long career, became part of the furniture, almost as inevitable as the stumps themselves, really.
Yeah, I mean, when I was growing up, I always had that advice: make the umpire your friend. You
Mm.
try to get on side. The DRS has kind of changed that in a way, because now it's just cut and dried, isn't it? It's so much, it's black and white now. It's out or not out, especially with LBWs, because of the technology, and also to some extent with those edges onto the pads and those nick behind. Sometimes they're difficult to work out. But yeah, make the umpire your friend, and I think I get that sort of sense, from people talking about playing while he was out there, that he kind of was your friend on the field, even though he had that, he still had that job to do.
Yeah, I think he was everybody's friend, actually. And that's what made him special. And his love for the game was totally infinitesimal. He just adored it. It was a privilege to him to be out there, part of the cricketing family.
Okay, Oz, let's move on to, if you like, more prosaic matters now. The England squad for the Ashes series has been announced. I mean, normally there's a great fanfare, isn't there? There's a big lead up to it. Who's going to be in? What are those sort of 2 or 3 picks that are going to make the difference, supposedly, for England? Who's going to get the nod? But actually, Brendan McCullum a week or two ago said there wouldn't be many surprises, and ultimately, there wasn't a surprise at all. Even Will Jacks's inclusion was flagged up in advance, and I don't know whether the sort of the path was laid for everyone to kind of accept it. And just looking at it, England teams are selected in very different ways under Brendan McCullum and in the modern era from how they were in the past. I mean, for example, Leach, who's been on Ashes tours in the past and also starred in an Ashes Test match famously at Headingley in 2019. He's taken 50 wickets at 22 this summer. I mean, those are stats that just cry out, pick me. But he's not been selected. Instead, Will Jacks is England's backup spinner, who's played 3 championship matches this season, taken 5 wickets at 38. Of course, he has virtues, a lot of virtues as a batter, and he has played a little bit of Test cricket before, and he did take wickets in that Test match in Rawalpindi, that the high-scoring game where he took a bundle of wickets, went for a few runs on his Test debut. So Will Jacks is, in a way, one of the talking points. He's not necessarily the main talking point, because it might well be that he doesn't play a single Test match. I mean, he might play all 5. It's hard to know. It's kind of that slightly unpredictable aspect of this England side and the squad that they picked. They've said, they seem to have flagged up that Bashir is their main spinner. You don't quite know what's going to happen the closer you get to that first Test match. But so what did you think about Will Jackson? There's also Rayan Ahmed. He seemed to be in the frame as well. He's been picked in the white ball squads for the New Zealand series. He's been playing over in Ireland, England winning that series 2-0 the other day. So what did you make of Will Jackson? Then we'll move on to some of the other talking points.
I think it's an odd selection, because they really would have thought they need a second spinner, and I don't regard him as a second spinner. I regard him as he's a useful bowler, bit like Root, that he can do a job as a sort of emergency, really. I know he's taken 6 for in a test match in Pakistan, but I don't know, it was a bit sort of, I seem to remember that 1 or 2 slightly lucky wickets. He's not a bowler for me. He's not a frontline bowler. And what if Bashir gets injured? I suppose the Lions are there and they have spinners in their ranks. I would have thought of Tom Hartley or someone who has the opposite skills to Bashir, left arm spinner, spinning it away, would have been more valuable, or Rayan Ahmed, who obviously has credentials with the bat and ball. I would have gone for one of those. So I'm surprised about Will Jacks, really. Although I know he's a really talented cricketer, I can't see him playing, to be honest, unless Bashir is injured. And if Bashir is injured, surely they'll pick a specialist from the Lions. So it seems a slightly odd selection.
Well, I disagree with that point you made there, but they'll pick another spinner from the Lions. I'd have thought they'll pick Will Jacks. If they've selected Will Jacks and Bashir is injured or not fit, he's had this finger injury, surely they'll pick Will Jacks. Otherwise, what's the point of picking him in the first place?
Well,
I suppose you could argue.
Yeah.
You could.
Do they see him as a player who plays instead of a spinner? If they go to Perth, for instance, and they're not going to pick Bashir in Perth, perhaps, so they play Will Jacks as the sort of spinning option, but mainly for his batting. That was what I was saying. Whereas if Bashir is desired in the team as a specialist spinner and he's injured, I couldn't see them going for Jacks as an alternative.
So what you're saying is if they end up playing on a surface that looks as though it might spin from the start of the game, so I don't know, say Adelaide. I mean, Adelaide's spun in the past, hasn't it? I don't know whether it does now so much. If you go there and it's dry and Bashir gets an injury in training the day before, do you say, right, Will Jacks is our man, and is that the right option? Yeah, but I think I don't think you could just draft someone in at that point. I think they nailed it down to Will Jacks. It's a very modern pick, isn't it? It's a very Brendan McCullum style pick for the Ashes. And as I said just now, maybe he doesn't get a sniff of cricket on the whole Ashes tour. Maybe, who knows? Maybe plays quite a lot. Yeah, look, it's an interesting one. It's very much a modern one. Let's move on. So Mark Wood is in the squad. The release we were given today, he is fit. He's back fit again. Of course, he hasn't played any cricket, but again, something we discussed last time, that he's one of those bowlers that doesn't feel he needs loads of cricket to come out and bowl successfully in a test match, and that was the case last time. But then, in the last Ashes series, but he's a couple of years older. He has had more injuries. I mean, they're desperate to have him. Absolutely desperate to have him as part of their attack. And if those 7 bowlers, or the 6 main ones, and then Matthew Potts, those 6 main bowlers can stay and be fit collectively from the first test through the series, then that's something for Australia's batting lineup to think about. I think one of the problems last summer against India is that you had some bowlers who were kind of like over bowled, and some who hadn't really bowled at all, and they were trying to sort of mix and match all summer. There was never a point where, like, right, start this test match, everyone is like fit and firing. I think that was part of their problem. And what they'll hope is when they get to Perth, that first test match, or for the when they get to Brisbane for the second test and the third test in Adelaide, that those 6-7 bowlers are all in kind of a level, like an even level of fitness and form as well.
And I think that's quite a handy attack. I mean, those bowlers, if they're all fit, Archer, Gus Atkinson, who looked pretty good in that last championship match in patches. Obviously, Bryden Cass is there as well. Josh Tongue, I mean, it's pretty good, actually, isn't it? And then Matthew Potts is a sort of backup. It's a good group of fast bowlers, but you just got to get the right ones on the path. And Stokes, yeah. Sure. They're well equipped. Let's just hope they pick the right guys and they don't break down during a game.
Yeah, well, I think you could almost pick any of them, can't you? You could perm probably 4 from those 6. Well, 3 from 5, because Stokes, you feel you've got to have him. Unless at Perth they don't play a spinner, and Stokes is a kind of like a 5th bowler. They play 4 pace bowlers and Ben Stokes, and Stokes bowls a bit anyway. Unless that's another potential option if they don't go with a spinner at Perth. Although we know that Ben Stokes likes it, so likes to have a spinner. So yeah, you've got that quality ready to go. That's the key point, isn't it, for England? I think.
Yeah, and when England won the Ashes last in 2010-11 in Australia, they had a similar group of good fast bowlers, a real mixture of interesting players, all brought something slightly different. Chris Tremlett, very tall. Tim Bresnan, nagging line and length. Obviously, Jimmy Anderson, Stephen Finn. Stuart Broad was in that group as well, but he got injured, didn't he? But, they had a good group there of fast bowlers, and most of them stayed fit, and they were able to sustain their intensity through that series. But, of course, in the end, the key to that series was runs. I wrote this on Sunday, actually, that, despite whatever bowlers you take out, if you don't get runs in Australia, you don't win. And, runs have got to be at a premium. So the batting has got to do their job. We'll talk
I mean,
about this more in the run-up, but, clearly that's one of the things which the batters are all going to have a bit of headspace, aren't they? So apparently Harry Brook has gone on holiday, and his coach, Martin Spate, was telling me that a guy who is such an assiduous practicer, who will leave no ball unturned in his quest for sort of technical supremacy, a bit like Root, even he gave up nets during the 100 because he was so mentally tired from the schedule, from the India series and captaining the one-day side and all that. So he just didn't even have a net during the 100 at all. And quite rightly, he's now taken a break, because that's what they'll need the most, isn't it? I think, is sort of headspace, mentally fresh, especially the batters before that first test.
It's funny, actually. I had this kind of. I was thinking about this the other day. What I would have done at the end of the T20 series if I were Harry Brook, what break I would take, where would I go? What's he done? I'm only speculating. I think I might have gone, I don't know,
Wildlife Park?
3 weeks to America or something like that, or a couple of weeks to Greece or something. You think you've got the weather problem, haven't you, this time of year? The summer begins to fade in Europe. Perhaps not so much in southern Europe. Perhaps he's playing golf in Portugal, something like that. But, just something completely different to get away from it. A real sort of 2-3 week break, if you possibly can have that. Because there's not that much time, because they've got this white ball series in New Zealand, which, Harry Brook is leading the side there. When he dipped out the IPL, this is kind of the reason, because of all the cricket. If you're playing all this cricket, and we're on to Harry Brook now, of course, and the other main talking point today is that Ollie Pope has been stripped of the vice captaincy, or at least replaced by Harry Brook. What do you make of that? Is that they just see Brook as a better leader, and therefore as a potential future captain of the Test team? You'd think that, wouldn't you, because he's taken over the white ball team? Or does that give them some room to make a change as well, with just taking Ollie Pope out of the team, with Jacob Bethell potentially coming in at number 3?
Well, I think you're probably right. You're probably right on both counts there. Yeah, I couldn't put it better. Brook is a coming man as a leader, and he's shown quite a lot of tactical acumen, hasn't he, in his leadership roles as one-day captain and also in the 100. It's a learning process. You're not going to be the finished article as a captain. You need lots of experience, but he's getting it at a young age. I'd never thought Ollie Pope was quite right as captain. I thought he was a sort of slightly reluctant captain, really, when he was pressed into service. Good deputy, very enthusiastic guy, great cricketer. Good cricket brain, but somehow doesn't have authority, somehow. I don't know why. Some people just have it, some don't. I know I never had it. And some people do. And Brook sort of seems to be a fairly natural leader, confident in the role, good thinker on the game, obviously secure in his position, Hope less so. So, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you just said there is key to it as well, isn't it? Pope not so secure in his position, Harry Brook very secure in his position. It's quite a difficult situation, isn't it, to have a player who you have potentially some doubts about. And, we've said it before, and perhaps even Ollie Pope himself, if he were really honest with himself, would say that he's a better number 5 for England than a number 3. That he's made runs down the order, and made them well. But, of course, there isn't a place at number 5 really, and there is a place at number 3, unless Jacob Bethell fills it. It does seem odd, actually, talking about Jacob Bethell playing at number 3 when you consider the test match he had against India, albeit without any practice, the test match he had against India at the Oval, where he didn't succeed and he looked a bit all at sea. And there's still that conversation about whether he's going to bat at 3 for the first test of the Ashes. It's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, it's and Ben Stokes has backed Ollie Pope in the past quite vehemently. So I mean, what are we to make of it? It's still watch this space. It feels a little bit still to be decided. It's kind of like, it just feels, with just taking the vice captaincy of Ollie Pope, it just feels like another brick's been removed, if you like. But I honestly don't know. I don't know who's going to bat at 3 in that first Test match. I
No,
was pretty convinced after the Oval that it would be Ollie Pope, but I'm a bit less convinced now.
I mean, I think Bethel has been given a huge responsibility, hasn't he, to captain those one-day matches in Ireland, to be putting up the order number 4 for the ODIs and delivering with his first international professional 100. He's definitely someone that England have earmarked for big things in the future. I think he's also learnt a lesson this summer, and I was told by a coach at Warwickshire that he was asked if he wanted to play for Warwickshire in the summer a couple of times, in a couple of 4 days when he wasn't playing Test cricket, and he turned the opportunity down, I'm told, and I think now regrets it because he realised it could have been useful practice, useful experience, which he declined. He wanted to be around England. He sees his future, I suppose, with England more, and perhaps he realised that he should have perhaps taken the opportunity there to play some 4-day cricket and just get a bit of rhythm going. You know, Joe Root was on that Stick to Cricket podcast, our rival podcast, the Vorney Tuffers one, and he was saying what he looks for in his batting is flow. That's what he's after most of all. It's something I haven't been able to put into words for about 10 years. What he has, what is it that Joe Root provides? But it's how he described it is this sort of rhythm and flow, and that's what enables him to play the innings he does. And until you've batted a bit in a season, I think it's hard to find that.
Yeah. I think as a batter, I mean, Jeffrey would be banging on about it relentlessly, wouldn't he? You know, he'd want as much time in the middle, but it seems as if modern players are not so concerned by that. Can't understand that. I mean, as a club player, you want to bat every minute of every day you possibly can, wouldn't you? And
Thank
not
God we
bat
don't have to
all
watch you
afternoon.
do that.
Well, that's probably true, Yols. But you know, you'd rather bat than not
Would
bat.
you
You know,
actually pay people to watch you? I think you'd have to.
I probably would. Yeah.
Listen, we should, we've talked for ages, but I mean, interesting stuff. So obviously the New Zealand series gets underway fairly soon, doesn't it? Middle of October, yeah. So as you say, not long really, end of September, and they'll be starting to plan their trip.
Well, they're leaving on the 10th of October, and the first match is on the 18th of October, which is a T20 match. So 3 T20s, 3 one-day internationals. Zach Crawley getting himself a game in the T20s. Oz. Well, that's one minor talking point. He had a good 100, didn't he? Good white ball pedigree there. But possibly as well just getting a bit of cricket leading into the Ashes. I mean, got this strange build up to the Ashes, which is basically this white ball tour in New Zealand, and that match against the Lions in Perth, leading into the first Test match against Australia on the 1st of November. The countdown is very definitely on. Now they've named the squad. England have shown their hand, haven't they? Not a particularly surprising hand. I think that's actually one of the, just to finish, that is one of the talking points, that we kind of know who's going to be in the squad. And it's just one or two sort of dots on I's and crosses of T's, really. But most of the players knew they were going to be in that squad. And the Will Jacks one, and was Mark Wood going to be fit? That's probably, with the other areas. Matthew Potts as the seam bowler. That's kind of flagged up as well. Although he's not played that much under Brendan McCullum, has he? He's been on the fringes. He's had one or two opportunities and then cast aside. But looking around, there aren't that many other obvious and solid options, really. He feels like quite a solid option, Matthew Potts.
Yeah, he's a willing donkey, isn't he? And a good donkey as well. So, well, good luck to him as well. I like the way they've announced the squad today because it leaves the space clear now for the next 4 days for the climax of the county championship, doesn't it? No more speculation. Everybody knows who's going. And now Notts and Surrey and all those other teams can concentrate on the last 4 days of the championship season. We'll be back towards the end of the week to review what's happened, especially in Division 1. So that's it for today. Thanks for listening, and RIP the great Dickie Bird.